They only measure a man's worth when he's no longer around to explain it himself. What if respect came too late and the one who deserved it never asked for it? Let us know in the comment section below. Then stay with us to see how this story unfolds. Who let that guy sign up to speak? Councilman Greg Lathrop's voice dripped with disdain as he leaned back in his leather chair, the kind that reclined just enough to pretend he wasn't watching. He clicked the end of his silver pen with a rhythm tap, tap, snap before twirling it between his fingers. He wasn't reading the agenda. He didn't need to. He already made up his mind before today's city council meeting even started. The room hummed with idle chatter and clicking cell phones. The Ashbury Municipal Building wasn't built for pageantry. Its walls were beige, its fluorescent lights sterile, but to Lathrop it might as well have been a stage, one where he controlled the script. "Some old vet, Samuel something," muttered his aide from the side, shuffling notes. "Signed up last minute to talk during the budget segment." Lathrop didn't look up. "Well, unless he's planning to hand us a check for $300,000, I don't care what boots he dragged in." He laughed at his own joke. A few chuckles trickled in from the row behind him. City employees, interns, people too polite or too ambitious to not laugh when the boss cracked wise. That was Greg Lathrop. Money spoke, image mattered. Veterans were sentimental PR tokens, useful on Veterans Day or when posing next to bronze plaques. Beyond that, they were just numbers in the budget ledger. And that budget was bleeding red ink. Outside in the hallway, sitting alone on the metal bench beneath a fading photo of Ashbury's first mayor, Samuel Oldman stared down at his hands. Thick hands. Steady. Callous knuckles, cracked skin, fingernails stained faint gray with oil and time. They didn't tremble, not yet. He rolled one boot heel forward, the worn sole scraping softly against the linoleum. The leather was cracked from years of sun and snow. He had other shoes, nicer ones, in fact. But these were the boots. The ones he kept when he left Camp Pendleton. The ones he wore when he buried his father. The ones he wore when the foundation for Ashbury's first veterans shelter was poured. He didn't wear them for nostalgia. He wore them because every scuff, every mark told part of the truth. His truth. The door opened with a mechanical creak. "You're up," said a young assistant with nervous eyes and a clipboard. "Mr. Oldman, it's your turn to speak." Samuel stood slowly. No limp, no cane, just a quiet, deliberate rise. The assistant waited, expecting Samuel to say something. He didn't. He simply nodded and moved forward. Inside, the chatter died the moment he entered. People turned, some out of curiosity, a few out of annoyance. Greg Lathrop leaned toward the mic. "Mr. Oldman, you have 3 minutes." Samuel didn't respond. He walked forward, hands relaxed at his sides, posture upright. He didn't carry any notes, no binders, no charts. Just those boots echoing with every step. He stopped in front of the microphone. Then he said nothing. 10 seconds passed. 15. A full 20. Murmurs stirred from the gallery. Lathrop sighed dramatically into his mic. "Mr. Oldman, the time limit does start when you reach the podium. If you have something to say—" "Don't worry," Samuel said quietly, his voice dry but smooth, like a file on old steel. "I won't need more than 2. The room settled. "I wore these boots when my squad pulled civilians out of a mudslide in Da Nang," he began. "We weren't supposed to be there, officially. Unofficially, those kids needed saving, so we went in. We came out with 37 people. I wore these boots when my best friend bled out in my arms. We were 19. I had to carry what was left of him in these boots. Then I came home." He paused, gaze scanning the council. "I walked into a hiring office in Ashbury the week after I landed. Still had dirt on my boots. They told me to come back when I looked more professional, so I did. 3 weeks later, I came back in a suit. I got the job. Worked 32 years straight. Paid taxes, coached Little League, volunteered at the VFW, raised a daughter, buried a wife, helped build 2 homes for vets like me who didn't get lucky enough to find their footing. I did it quietly, didn't ask for anything. His hand rested gently on the podium. But now, this council wants to cut the funding for those homes. The homes for the men who wore boots like mine. He stepped back slightly. I get it, budgets are tight, but before you strike a line through a life, I'd like to ask one thing. He reached down slowly and untied one boot, then placed it beside the podium. Then the other. Silence. This is what I've got left. You don't need to honor me, but don't forget the people who still walk in these. He turned and started walking back, socks on cold linoleum. No one moved. No one spoke. Not until a chair scraped sharply across the floor. Chief Daniel Brooks stood. He had been silent the entire time, seated in the back, uniform pressed, duty belt weighing his hips. He moved forward, steady. As Samuel reached the aisle, Chief Brooks raised his hand and saluted. In full proper military-grade salute. No one breathed. Then another chair scraped, then another. One by one, veterans, officers, firefighters, even an old janitor near the exit. They stood, saluted, or bowed their heads, or placed a hand on their heart. Samuel kept walking, not fast, just forward. And Greg Lathrop for once said nothing at all. The sound of the boots being placed beside the podium lingered in the minds of everyone even after Samuel Oldman had gone. The echo of each step he took away from that microphone didn't just fade into silence. It stayed, haunting the polished chambers like a question no one had the courage to answer. Greg Lathrop tapped the mic again, though no one was listening. He coughed once, an awkward bark meant to reclaim the air. "Let's resume with the next item on the agenda," he muttered, but his voice was shaky. No one moved. A woman in the back row stood slowly. "You're not seriously moving on, are you?" she asked, arms folded tight against her chest. Her name was Elise Cranston. She taught 4th grade, and she had watched one of her students' fathers overdose last year. An Army veteran with nowhere to go and nothing to come home to. "Mrs. Cranston, you're not recognized," Lathrop shot back. "I don't need to be recognized. He was—" Her voice cracked, but only slightly. Chief Brooks still stood at the back of the room, his hand now resting on the brim of his hat, eyes narrowed at the council table. He hadn't taken his seat. In fact, he hadn't even blinked since Oldman left. Lathrop leaned toward one of the other council members, Councilwoman Denise Leary, who was still staring at the boots. "Denise," he whispered, "help me out here. This is getting off track." But she didn't reply. Pause stretched longer than anyone liked. Greg cleared his throat again. "We have a vote scheduled in the next session regarding the proposed consolidation of municipal funding, which includes a small restructuring of the Veteran Support Fund. This anecdotal testimony, while compelling, doesn't change our financial limitations." Anecdotal. That word hit like a backhand. From the crowd, a deep voice cut through. "Tell that to my unit, Councilman." Every head turned. A man stood at the far side of the room. Leather jacket, gray beard, desert tan boots. His name tag from the hardware store still clung to his shirt. Rick. But no one cared about the name right now. They saw the eyes that had seen the same things old men had, maybe worse. "I served 2 tours, one in Fallujah, one in Kunar. Came back with half my hearing and all of my guilt. The only reason I didn't hang myself in my garage was because of the vet housing program. Same program you're trying to erase like it's a typo on a spreadsheet." Greg opened his mouth, but Rick wasn't done. "You call that anecdotal, I call it my life." A ripple of murmured approval moved through the seats. Some nodded. A few clapped. Then the clapping grew louder. Lathrop slammed his gavel twice. "This is not a public forum," he barked. "You made it one the second you disrespected that man's boots," Rick shouted. The room was swelling not with noise, but with tension. Unspoken loyalties began taking shape. Quiet resentment found its voice. Samuel Oldman wasn't even in the building anymore, but he was everywhere. Chief Brooks finally took a step forward. One slow, deliberate step. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "I'd like to speak, Councilman." Greg stiffened. "Chief Brooks, you are not scheduled. I'm requesting the floor under Special Order 13. Emergency discretion by municipal enforcement." Lathrop blinked. "That's for active safety concerns." "I consider morale of this town a safety concern," Brooks replied. Without waiting for a reply, the chief walked to the podium. And for a moment the lights seemed to dim, not physically, but emotionally. The chief didn't bring notes, just gravity. "I've served Ashbury as police chief for 17 years. Before that, I served my country in Panama and Iraq. I know what crisis looks like. It doesn't always wear a balaclava or carry a weapon. Sometimes it wears a suit and a fake smile, while it dismantles the only structures holding people together." He paused. "I've seen the calls. Vets curled up in abandoned lots, men screaming into the wind at 3 a.m. because no one would listen at 3 p.m., women with Purple Hearts, and eviction notices taped to the same damn mailbox. And yet, somehow, they find strength to stand up. Just like Samuel did tonight." He nodded toward the empty aisle Oldman had walked through. "I salute him not just because of what he was, but because of what he still is. A soldier, a citizen, a cornerstone." Brooks leaned forward now. "And if this council thinks it can vote away dignity, it's mistaken." Silence. No one moved. The council members shifted in their chairs like schoolchildren after being scolded. But Greg Lathrop couldn't give ground. Not publicly. He leaned forward again, finding his voice. "Chief, with respect, the vote must be based on data, not sentiment. We have other pressing financial priorities. Infrastructure, law enforcement, education." "Don't talk to me about law enforcement priorities," Brooks interrupted. "Half my force are vets. You want to keep them working? Keep them living first." A few people clapped again. Someone shouted, "That's right." Lathrop stood, pushing his chair back. "This isn't productive. We'll reconvene with a formal vote next week. Meeting adjourned." He slammed the gavel. The room didn't budge. Then the sound started. Soft at first. A scraping. Someone was moving. Not toward the exit. Toward the boots. It was Denise Leary. She walked from the council table, heels clicking gently, and knelt beside the podium. She didn't touch the boots. She just stared at them. Then, after a long breath, she looked out into the crowd. "I move that the vote on veteran housing funding be postponed until public hearing can be expanded. We need to hear from them." Greg spun toward her, mouth open. "You can't motion after adjournment." "It's symbolic," she said. "Like those boots. Like this whole room. A beat." Then Chief Brooks stepped forward. And that's when it happened. The crowd stood. All of them. Not with fists or chants, but with stillness. The kind of stillness you only see at a funeral or when a nation says goodbye to its heroes. And in that silence a message louder than any speech was sent. Samuel Oldman didn't stay to see this. He didn't need to. He trusted that if he spoke with truth, someone else would carry the weight after he set it down. The resistance had started, and Ashbury wasn't going back. A Tuesday morning in Ashbury didn't usually mean much to anyone. The town had its routine. Commuters with travel mugs, mailboxes yawning open, and porch flags lazily catching the breeze. But this Tuesday was different. The coffee shop on Main had never seen a crowd like this, not even during fall festival season. Veterans, teachers, retirees, high schoolers with signs. A few wore jackets with unit patches, others came in plain T-shirts that read nothing but said everything. They stood shoulder to shoulder, not shouting, but waiting. Waiting for the town to show them what it really stood for. Inside the building next door, the old Elks Lodge converted into a temporary public hearing hall, the air was thick with tension and anticipation. Folding chairs creaked. Cell phones buzzed on silent. Everyone was there for one reason: the postponed vote on veteran housing. Denise Leary sat at the front table, pen in hand, flipping through the public feedback report she had asked to be compiled. The stack was heavier than she expected. Letters, testimonies, statistics. Some typed, others handwritten with ink that smudged around tear stains and shaky hands. She didn't need them to make her case, but she wanted to feel the weight of them. Greg Lathrop entered 5 minutes late. He always entered late. It was a power thing, make people wait. Except this time, nobody stood up, nobody nodded, nobody gave him that politician's oxygen of acknowledgement. He noticed. He straightened his collar, scanned the crowd, and offered a polite smile. No one returned. Not even the mayor. The mayor, who usually sat beside him during these things, had chosen a seat at the opposite end of the panel this morning. That was a message. Lathrop got it. Heard too late. Chief Brooks was already there, arms folded, not in uniform today, but in a navy polo that read Ashbury Vets Initiative in white stitching over the heart. A subtle choice, a loud statement. The hearing began. The mayor stood. She was a small woman, late 60s, with soft features that could harden with astonishing speed. Today they were steel. We'll begin by hearing final remarks from members of the community regarding funding for the Ashbury Veteran Housing Network. Please keep statements under 2 minutes. The first speaker was a woman named Jamie Powell, single mom, clerk at the DMV, Marine widow. She brought a photograph of her husband in dress blues holding their newborn daughter. His name was Adam, she said softly. And when he came back, he wasn't the same. I lost him 3 times. First, when he deployed. Second, when he returned. Third, when I found him on our garage floor. That housing network? It wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a place to pause, to breathe. I don't need sympathy. I need you to protect the living before they end up with flags on their coffins. Her time ran out, but no one stopped her. No one wanted to. The mayor didn't even look at the clock. Next came Isaiah Boone, 18, senior, ROT. My uncle lives at Red Maple House, the one on Miller Street. Before that, he was behind the Circle K living in a tent. I didn't know he was a Marine until I saw the tattoo under his sleeve. He never talked about it. Now he volunteers at the high school. He's the reason I'm joining up. I want to serve my country. Just don't make me scared of coming back. He stepped down, and one by one they came forward. A nurse who ran suicide prevention workshops, a truck driver who'd fought in Mogadishu, a former addict turned counselor who said the veteran house on Oak saved his life by giving him 4 walls and someone who didn't look away. Greg Lathrop didn't speak. Not yet. He sat back, jaw tight, watching the tide roll in, relentless and undeterred. He was a numbers man. He believed in graphs and line items. Not this. He glanced down at his phone. 4 texts from donors. 2 from the City Finance Committee. Don't cave. Cut somewhere else if you must, but show control. The optics are bad. Spin it. Don't give in. He gritted his teeth. He had 2 options. Stick to his plan and ride the backlash, or bend and admit defeat. When the last speaker sat down, the mayor opened the floor for council discussion. Greg rose, not because he wanted to, because everyone expected it. When he adjusted his tie, tightened it too much, and took his time walking to the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, voice calm, smooth, rehearsed. I've heard what you've said, all of you, and I won't pretend your stories didn't affect me. A few skeptical murmurs from the audience. But we still have a duty to the entire community to balance the needs of every citizen. Students, public servants, infrastructure projects, safety measures. It's not a question of whether our veterans deserve support. They do. It's a question of how we sustain it. He paced slightly. Sometimes sentiment outweighs strategy, and we can't afford that. That was it. That was his line in the sand. He didn't see the door open behind him, didn't hear the quiet steps entering from the back row, but the people in the seats did. And they straightened, every one of them, because Samuel Oldman had returned. He wasn't supposed to, he didn't he didn't on the list. He simply walked in, same boots, same gait, same quiet purpose. Greg turned just as the crowd began shifting, not speaking, but reacting. Samuel didn't go to the podium. He didn't need to. He just stood in the aisle and said calmly, "You've had weeks, Councilman. I gave you the truth in 2 minutes, and now I've come to see if you're man enough to answer it." Lathrop stared. Samuel took 2 steps forward, then stopped, and smiled. "Don't worry," he said. "I brought friends this time." That's when a group from the back stood, men and women from every branch, jackets with patches, hands on hearts. And then, slowly, firmly, they began to move toward the front. Not to rush, to stand, to shout. Chief Brooks joined them. Denise stood. Even the mayor stepped down and joined the line. A wall of veterans, of memory, of living proof. Greg Lathrop looked at his hands, at his podium, at the stack of budget documents that now felt absurdly small. He had nothing left to say, only one vote left to cast, and the whole town was watching. Greg Lathrop's hands hovered over the stack of budget papers like they might save him. They wouldn't, not this time. The hearing room wasn't loud, it was still, but it was the kind of stillness that pressed down on a man's chest, the kind that demanded a response. He could hear the breath of every person in the audience, the hum of old lights overhead, and the soft, unmistakable creak of worn leather boots shifting on linoleum behind him. Samuel Oldman said nothing more. He didn't have to. His presence in that aisle, flanked by veterans, had already tipped the scale. Not through confrontation, but by simply existing as the evidence that truth sometimes walks softly and still shakes the earth. The mayor stepped up to the dais, her gavel in hand. "Council, we now call for an immediate vote on Item 3, funding for Ashbury Veteran Housing Network. Motion on the floor is to not only preserve the current funding but increase it by 20% through emergency allocation." Silence. "Councilmember Leary?" the mayor asked. "Councilmember Chen? Councilmember Morales? Councilmember Lathrop?" The room held its breath. Greg looked at his papers, then at the room, then at Samuel. His shoulders dropped. Not in defeat, but in understanding. The kind that takes too long to reach a man too proud for too long. He stood, slowly. "I once said we had to balance strategy with sentiment," he said, his voice quieter now, stripped of its usual polish. "But I forgot that respect isn't sentiment, it's debt. One that doesn't go away just because the numbers get tight." He nodded, first to the mayor, then to Samuel. The room didn't erupt into cheers. At first, the silence broke with something softer. Applause. From the back, then the middle, then all at once, hands clapped. Not like fans at a game, but like people saying thank you without words. A standing ovation not for victory, but for acknowledgement long overdue. Samuel didn't smile. He just closed his eyes for a second and breathed. But vote. One voice. One truth finally heard. The mayor raised her hand to quiet the room, but not completely. "We'll finalize the paperwork with the finance office and coordinate the additional funding immediately. In the meantime, we have something else." She turned to Samuel. "Mr. Oldman, please come forward." He hesitated. But then Chief Brooks stepped beside him, whispered something no one else could hear, and together they walked to the front. The mayor reached under the desk and pulled out a wooden box. She opened it carefully, revealing a velvet-lined interior. Inside, an Ashbury Medallion of Civic Honor, the highest non-military recognition the city could give. "We don't often issue these," she said, her voice catching slightly, "but it felt right, not because you asked for it, but because you reminded us why it matters to keep our word." She extended it. Samuel looked down at the medal, then back up. "I didn't come for awards," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. "That's why it's yours." He accepted it, feeling not with flourish, but just with grace. The applause rose again, but this time it turned to something else. A voice, young, strong, trembling just enough to reveal the weight behind it, called out from the back, "Attention on deck!" And like that, instinct kicked in. Every veteran stood straight. Hands snapped to brows. A room of civilians followed in awkward, respectful imitation. And then Chief Brooks, still in his polo, still the quiet giant of the day, stepped back, faced Samuel, and saluted again. Not rushed, not ceremonial, a full, crisp salute. Samuel, after a moment's pause, returned it, filling 2 men, 2 uniforms long retired, 2 truths never forgotten. And in that moment nothing else mattered. Not numbers, not arguments, just respect. After the meeting, people lingered. They didn't rush home. Conversations bloomed in the hallway. Strangers introduced themselves. Stories spilled out like water breaching a long, dry well. Stories about uncles, grandfathers, daughters. Stories about honor, about loss, about service that no longer had to stay silent. Outside, the sun began to set. The steps of the municipal building filled with people, not protesting, not petitioning, just standing. Samuel stood with them. A boy approached him, maybe 10 years old, holding something in both hands. "Mr. Oldman," he said. Samuel looked down. "My dad said you're the reason they're building another house for veterans. He told me to give you this." The boy held out a drawing. Crane on notebook paper, a pair of brown boots, big, scratched, laced to the top, and above them, written in blue marker, "Thank you for standing." Samuel took the drawing carefully, folded it once, tucked it into the inside pocket of his coat, then looked around. Ashbury wasn't big. It wasn't rich, but today it felt whole. Behind him, Chief Brooks stood nearby, arms crossed, nodding at the sight. Denise Leary approached, holding her own stack of letters. "You know this isn't the end of it, right?" she said. Samuel nodded. "Never is. But today," she began, then paused. Today was a good one. He looked at her, the corner of his mouth curling. Today was earned. And then he turned back toward the town he'd quietly helped build, quietly helped save, and now quietly watched stand a little taller. Not because he shouted, but because he showed up, with old boots and a voice no one could ignore anymore.